What's up, girls? I just read Leaving the Atocha Station by Ben Lerner. Um, I would say this is like the bookiest book I've ever read, if that makes sense. Um, First of all, I really liked it. It's 190 pages, came out in 2011. Um, Ben Lerner is from Topeka, Kansas. He teaches at Brooklyn College, famously taught Ocean Vuong and poetry. Ben Lerner is also a poet and has won the Fulbright Scholarship after studying at Brown, and has also won the MacArthur Genius Grant. This book, I feel like when you study plot mechanics for like how to write a book, this book does every single thing that they tell you should do in a novel and does them all really well. So one of the things they tell you should do is like have your characters be liars. And this book to me is like basically one big web of lies. The main character is named Adam, and he's on a Fulbright scholarship in Madrid, which Ben Lerner also had a Fulbright scholarship in Madrid, but it's not supposed to be like autofiction exactly, is my understanding. It's just like, he's using that experience that he had to write this novel. And the character clearly has imposter syndrome about being a poet and winning the scholarship. So there's like a web of lies there. And because Spanish is not his native language, because he's from Kansas, there's also like kind of a misunderstanding that's always happening, which is not exactly a lie, but just kind of muddies information as it's going on. And the novel's written in first person, and it's like pretty psychological. You get to see the inside of Adam's head quite a bit. And I would say like the main conflicts that he has are with his two love interests, Isabel and Teresa. And those are interesting because it feels like he's always lying to them. He does literally lie to them sometimes, saying like, "Oh, like I can't hang out with you. I've got to meet this other poet." But it's very clear that he's afraid of being rejected or wants to make himself seem cooler than he is. That he's anxious about being himself. There's also kind of the more nuanced lie that I feel like happens a lot in relationships, especially romantic relationships, where he's saying something that is actually the truth, but saying it in a way where it's actually intended to mean something else. So she'll be like, "Are you busy this weekend?" And he'll say no, and then he'll muse on why he said no, the way that he did, to make it seem like he is usually busy. It's all those kind of like indirect lies that you can justify to yourself aren't real lies. So that's all very interesting and like very propulsive and dynamic. He lies about his mom being dead. He lies about his dad being a fascist. Just trying to like generate intrigue for himself. And that's like the tendency to want to do that, I feel like, is very human because it just reveals about the character that he's uncomfortable being himself. Another reason I feel like it's like very booky or very literary is, it takes place in a European city. He's always musing on visual art. He spends a lot of time in museums. And the cover is actually like a blurred Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch. Those are kind of the figures there over on one side, and they're being blurred across the page there. But he spends a lot of time in museums, a lot of time talking about art. The character is a poet himself, and his poems are in the book, and so it feels like at times the novel is a vessel to kind of discuss other art forms, which to me is just like so novelistic. I totally like understand that tendency. And I feel like also the demographic or like the audience that reads a book like this, like a serious literary novel, is going to be pretty interested in like other serious art forms. And so it is really nice, like to have some poetry and some paintings thrown in. Um, I guess another layer to his kind of web of lies is that he's always taking drugs, which are unnamed. He has white pills. I believe at one point he takes a yellow pill. He's always drinking, always smoking weed. Um, that, again, kind of shows you he's anxious about being himself, but also like his behavior is then like plausible as kind of a lie because he's not really himself in a lot of the situations. And that's an amazing plot device again. I feel like I see in a lot of good books, in a lot of literary books, or like have the character always be drinking, or drinking coffee, or even smoking cigarettes. There's also something to be said about like I feel like as a reader, it's pleasing even to think about a fictional character, you know, drinking a cup of coffee. If you're a person who like really enjoys coffee, it almost like triggers that dopamine response of actually doing it yourself, which is interesting. Um, the book is then kind of tied into this terrorist attack, which happened in Madrid, and, becomes kind of political. And, he like, it's funny because like all of these Spaniards are taking it all very seriously and going to the marches. And it seems like he being Adam, the protagonist, is only really using the marches for like personal gain, kind of only to appear certain ways to his various love interests or, his community there. And there's a lot of buildup in the book, which kind of reminded me of Flesh by David Zalai, about how like there's a lot of anticlimax throughout the book where things will be kind of building towards something and you think something's going to go terribly wrong and then it kind of just doesn't. And I feel like that's a very postmodern, very contemporary like thing to do in a novel, because I feel like it is kind of reflective of our time that like we have all this anxiety about what could possibly go wrong, but we are actually a lot safer and, more control of our lives than we realize, especially like in the West, in the whatever middle or upper class West. A lot of your anxieties are bound to be, kind of for nothing. Um, I also did really love his prose style. I've been transcribing The Great Gatsby by pen and paper, trying to really work on my own prose. And I noticed some similarities between Fitzgerald and Lerner. They're not that similar, but one thing I've noticed Fitzgerald do a lot is he'll start dialogue and then he'll kind of punctuate the dialogue with the way that the person says what they're saying in the middle of a sentence, if that makes sense. So an example would be like, I'm not from here, would be the beginning of the dialogue. And then he would say like, Helena yelled over the music with her hand in the air. And she'd say, I'm really from Arkansas. And to put that kind of break in the middle of the dialogue changes how the dialogue would be received, like changes the flow. It's like, a completely different thing than if you were to just put the dialogue in one straight line, in one straight sentence, and then have the way she said it either before or after. Ben Lerner does not do that much with dialogue, but he does that with just his sentence structures, just his sentences in general. He like has these kind of long, not run-on sentences, but just very long sentences that have a lot of commas with clauses in the middle of them, and the clause is typically modifying what's just been said with a new thought. So it would be like, I told Arturo I wasn't going to read at the museum no matter what, comma. I told him I would show up and I would, sit there and watch the other poets read, comma, but it's not like I'm going to read myself, blah, 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 And each new clause kind of modifies the meaning of the previous clause and expands on it. And I really, really liked it. I really found it enjoyable. It has a way of like giving you a lot of information at a very high clip, like a lot of information per word at a very fast speed or something. And you would think that something like minimalism would maybe be better at doing that because it implies like the least amount of words possible. But I actually kind of got the impression reading this book that these longer sentences with all these clauses are actually communicating more than shorter sentences trying to say a lot. So that was just like some interesting prose stuff that I've been reflecting on and trying to work on myself. But his sentences definitely have like an amazing rhythm. I really enjoyed reading them. He's also really funny. A lot of like great jokes. And then I guess the last thing I'll say is like, it's interesting. Like the subject matter is not that dark in this book. It's kind of just like, it's very realistic. I feel like for the course of a life for someone who would be like a young man who was trying to be a poet in today's day and age, getting a Fulbright scholarship, going to Madrid, maybe drinking too much and smoking too much weed at a young age. But there is this like undercurrent of dread that really comes through in the pages, like kind of dread and anxiety. And at times it was like a little bit depressing, but it always shocks me, the author's ability to bring forth like a feeling, especially when that feeling doesn't exactly line up with the subject matter. I guess it's all tone and writing style that allows for all of that to come through. But yeah, I could kind of riff on this book forever, but I really enjoyed it. So go check out Leaving the Atocha Station by Ben Lerner. Thanks for watching.